Hey growers, Rich here, host of the Rich Terpene Show on CanadianCannabisRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in. Today's episode is the second half of our two-part intro to IPM. We were down in Stevensville speaking with Susan and Stacey at Natural Insect Control. Natural Insect Control has been providing beneficial insects to commercial growers for nearly 30 years, so they got a lot of experience with some of the bad guys that we're going to encounter when we're growing weed. So if you didn't get a chance, go back and take a listen to part 1 featuring Susan of Natural Insect Control. And if you did, get ready to enjoy part 2 featuring Stacey Hickman. What's up, guys? Rich here, host of the CanadianCannabisRadio.com podcast. You're listening to the Rich Terpene Show. We're here in Niagara with Stacey at Natural Insect Control. Stacey, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
So you're an entomologist.
I am an entomologist. I'm just a bug girl.
A bug girl. So tell me, what is an entomologist, first of all?
An entomologist is a person that actually studies insects, and my specialty is with beneficial insects, especially for the greenhouse sector.
And how did you get into this? How did you get into bugs? When did you decide that you like this?
That's an absolutely awesome question. I was the little kid that played with bugs all day she could possibly find them, and that was my real interest in it. I actually did a research project as a helper for the University of Guelph, and that really solidified what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
And you're pretty happy now doing bugs.
It is my passion. It's my absolute passion.
Right on. So why is this important for us? We're talking about growing cannabis. In the past few years, have you seen an increase in the number of cannabis growers that are using your services?
We absolutely have seen an increase in the number of growers that are using our beneficial insects. It's actually a really important thing for this particular crop because it's a crop that's ingestible. You don't want to have a crop that has pesticides on it, and when you use beneficial insects, then you don't have to have that worry.
What role does crop selection play when you're planning your IPM regime? So tomatoes versus cucumbers versus cannabis?
Crop selection is actually really important. There's definitely some pests that have a preference for a certain crop, and there are some beneficial insects that have a real preference for a certain crop. So knowing what we're working with can really tailor an IPM program to that particular crop. With cannabis, it has a really hairy leaf surface, which for some pests, they're absolutely fine. Other pests, they're not so much fine with that. It's the same for the beneficial insects. There's some predatory mites that can tolerate that hairy leaf surface, while others really do not like to be in it, and they will never work in a biological program.
Amongst the growers, the cannabis growers that you guys are working with, have you encountered any strains in particular that are more susceptible to pest pressures?
Absolutely. We are seeing that there are some strains that are more susceptible, but there's not a lot of information out there on that yet. The best advice that I can give for that is for growers to grow all different types of strains and really keep detailed records of when their pests show up, how the strain is being grown, because that can really help them down the road to tailor the strains that they are actually going to grow. Note-taking
and consistency. King.
Yes, absolutely. More notes, the better.
With regards to those particular strains, what is it about those strains that causes them to become infested? Are the insects biologically compelled towards certain plants? Is it something that the plant's producing that the insect likes to eat? Is it physical properties of the plant, like the growth habit, the node spacing? Is it similarities in ideal environment that kind of set the stage for one pest to thrive?
It's actually a combination of all of those things. Understanding why a pest goes to a certain plant is actually a really difficult thing to do. There could be microclimates that are created at that plant surface that are more inducive to pests coming to it. There's all sorts of factors that can actually be the reason why that pest is on that certain strain. And again, these are things that are not really known.
Within cannabis cultivation, you get growers that are growing in hydro, you get growers that are growing in soil, you get cocoa. How is my choice of growing medium going to affect my IPM regime?
No matter what you're growing in, you're going to get pests. There really isn't one media that's better than another at this point. The best advice, again, I could give is if you're going to use a media that has been stored, really look at how it is stored. We find that soil in particular, if it's stored in an outdoor facility, when you bring it in to use it in your grow, we find that it brings in a whole bunch of pests with it. So all of a sudden you've got tons of fungus gnats, and it's just basically because that bag of soil was stored in a place where the gnats could get into it and basically wait dormant until you used it for planting.
So with regards to hydroponics, you're probably going to see fewer soil-borne pests, but there's going to be a trade-off. There's going to be some other pests that you're going to encounter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You get rid of one thing and you get something else coming into it.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you is, do beneficial insects, do they eat other beneficial insects?
That is an awesome question. It is, some beneficial insects absolutely do eat other beneficial insects. So it's the idea of buying one expensive bug to feed another expensive bug, and I still have the pest. It's not something that we recommend ever. We really work hard with our growers and hard with our bugs to figure out how to fit them all together so nobody eats each other. We want them eating your pests. We don't want them eating each other at all. And it's actually kind of like a great puzzle to try to figure these connections all out.
So from a cultural standpoint, you guys are actually growing these bugs.
These bugs are actually grown every week for us. We have an insectary in British Columbia that we work with, and that is who is growing our bugs for us.
What's the life cycle like for these bugs? Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I imagine that comes into play quite a bit when you're putting together an IPM regime.
Absolutely. Every bug is different. The life cycle is unique to every beneficial insect that we do provide. And it is really important when you're looking at an IPM program, how fast do these insects cycle when they have pests? How fast do they cycle when we don't have pests? All of those factors are really important when you're starting to use these insects.
Right on. So I'm a grower. I'm growing reefer. Let's assume I'm doing it indoors. What are the common pests that I'm likely to encounter?
Oh, a great question. Common pests that you normally get in an indoor grow and even an outdoor grow are spidermites is probably your number one, followed up by thrips. You'll probably get fungus gnats. They tend to be a nuisance pest. Only in really high populations do they cause a lot of plant damage. You may get two very unusual pests at certain times of the year. You may get aphids coming in. You may get whitefly coming in. And then you may get something kind of fun like root aphids or springtails.
And why would you say that those ones are fun? What's different about those last two?
Those last two are really different pests, and it takes a long time and a really skilled grower to figure out that's what they have. Their symptoms on the plant look a lot like nutrient deficiencies, so it takes a while for people to figure out that it's actually a pest that's causing the problem and not just a nutrient deficiency.
The end user is really required to know their stuff to be using beneficial insects successfully.
Absolutely. That's actually where we come in. We're just a phone call away to be able to help you out with those difficult questions, to show you the signs and symptoms that you should be looking for when you have the pest, but also to explain what it looks like when you start to gain control and the signs that you should be looking for when that is happening. Having a really good person that you can call and can walk you through those things can really help the end user in their grow.
I've got a spidermite infestation. How did this happen, Stacey?
Yes, it's very common. Spider mites, in most cases, actually come in either on the plant material that you originally started with, and it may be a very small population that you don't notice it right away. Spider mites also have a really interesting way of hitching a ride on people. So people going in between crops from a dirty crop to a clean crop can absolutely bring spider mites in on them. I have also seen spider mites in vegetable crops come in on pollinators like bees. They hang onto the little legs of them and they fly in with the bees on them. So spider mite is actually highly mobile, even though it is a tiny little mite.
And I've heard of this happening before. You mentioned that they're coming in on pollinators. I've heard of ants herding aphids.
Absolutely.
This to me, like, this blows my mind when you think that there's this whole other little world going on down there.
Oh.
And this is something that I think that growers overlook often, is that there's an entire ecosystem within the ecosystem that they've created.
Absolutely. Ants and aphids go hand in hand. It's an amazing connection that they have between those two insects. That ant will protect an aphid colony. It'll prevent beneficial insects coming into that aphid colony to help control them. I've even seen ants actually eat beneficial insects to prevent them from getting to those aphids. So it's actually really important to look at all of the connections in a grow to see what is happening and why maybe a biological program is not working as well, or if it can be improved in some way, and it can simply be as simple as controlling those ants.
Is it possible I got spider mites from the grow store?
There is a possibility. I always assume when people are purchasing plants from a place that they're going to be coming in dirty, that we're always going to have some kind of pest on them. So we work with growers at doing a preventative program at that point, that we're always going to think that there's going to be something on them, that they're never going to come in 100% clean.
And is it possible to do that with a strictly beneficial insect-based controls? Is it possible to do that without the use of pesticides?
Absolutely. We have some really awesome beneficial insects that are absolutely preventative. One in particular is our soil mite, Australia laylaps. It also has a kissing cousin, Gillespie, which both of those are soil mites. They become inoculated into the soil. You can also use them in other medias. They become established. They feed on fungus gnats. They feed on shorefly larvae. They feed on thrip pupa. I have even some growers that use them for overwintering spidermites. It's one-time application. You put it in there and it lives in that media as long as you have plants growing in there. The other one that we use a lot of is actually Neocoelus phallacis. It's a preventative spider mite. Again, little tiny cream-colored mite found here in Niagara. So it has an interesting little story behind it. It feeds on wind-blown pollen, and it will live for a month without a food source. So excellent early spider mite preventer, loves a low spider mite population, works in low humidity. So it's got some real benefits to it for using it as a preventative control.
So is that what you'd recommend for me and my spider mites?
If you currently are not seeing spider mites, I definitely would go down the road with our Neocoelus phallacis. If you were seeing spider mites, we would go down another road using some of the more aggressive spider mite predators. Again, trying to get them to work all together so that you get the best control possible.
Okay, so I need some. Where do I get them?
Insects can be easily ordered from our website. They can be ordered over the phone with us. Really easy to do that. Even homegrown hydroponics does carry them.
Perfect. They arrive in the mail. I order them.
They arrive with couriers. Can't ship anything in the mail, but yes, they absolutely arrive with couriers.
So they arrive with couriers. I unbox the package. What is it going to look like?
Basically, what it's going to look like is this large white bottle with the green lid on it. If you open that up inside there, what you're going to see is the mites are mixed in sort of a vermiculite wood mixture, and that's just a carrier material. That's used for the mites. It gives them some protection. There's also a food mite in there so that they don't starve, and it keeps the sex ratio even. Those particular mites are for the soil. That's our Australia laylaps. And then the other one that we're talking about is our phallacis, and it actually comes in a vermiculite carrier in that small little pill bottle. You rotate it gently to mix the mites with the carrier material, and that can be just broadcast onto the leaf surface.
So I just sprinkle it on?
You basically just sprinkle it on.
Right on. So I just shake it on. And in the case of this particular, let's say this, I'm going to use this, well, you said that the phallacis is a prevention.
It is.
What am I going to use if I'm already seeing spider mites?
If you're already seeing spider mite, we're still going to recommend that you do use phallacis. It'll take care of the low spider mite populations, the plants that may not be showing any signs. If you're starting to see signs on your plants, especially if you're starting to see webbing, we'd actually recommend Phytocelinus persimilis. It's a little red mite, and it is a specialist for two-spotted spider mite, which cannabis is known to have a lot of. It will work in those areas of high spider mite populations. They'll walk on the webs, they'll feed on the spider mite eggs, the nymphs and the adults that are on those eggs, on those webs. And it's actually a really great way of stopping a rolling spider mite infestation. It may take a few applications to get it done. Biocontrol is never a one-shot deal. So it's really important that you kind of keep that in mind, that you are going to have to do repeated applications to gain control.
Right on. So I got some phallacis here. I'm going to sprinkle that on. I've also got some persimilis.
You're going to sprinkle that on too?
I'm going to sprinkle that on too. How long before I start to see some results?
It's really difficult to say. Every environment is a little bit different. Typically, we ask growers to take a look at the new growth coming out. So it's usually about 3 weeks in before you really start to see some great improvement on your plants. It's never right away. It definitely needs time with biological control to take a foothold and start controlling the pests that you have.
And what's happening throughout that time? Throughout that 3 weeks, what's happening on my plant, at plant level with the bugs?
At plant level with the bugs, you're starting to see fewer and fewer spider mites on your plants. You're starting to see more and more of our good guys, the phallacis and the persimilis in there. You're starting to see your new growth coming out. You're also starting to see that there is no more spread of the spider mite infestation. So no more plants are getting infested over those 3 weeks.
And so the symptoms of whatever pest infestation are going to start to disappear, and you're going to start to see healthy plants and fewer pests.
Exactly. It will never correct the damage that's already been done, but the new growth coming out should be cleaner.
So my grow's all cleared up. Thank you, Stacey. From a cultural standpoint, what steps should I be taking to ensure that this doesn't happen again?
Again, I can't talk about it enough. Prevention. So always thinking that when you're starting a new cycle that you're going to have spider mites, you're going to have to put something in there. So again, going back to using the flosses right away, as soon as they're rooted, they're out of the misting tents and you're done, that's the time to think about putting on that product. And again, using something like a soil mite predator to help you out with those fungus gnats and other pests that might be happening. Use those right at the beginning. Both of those are your prevention, and it's really important to think about that.
Now, I got to ask you one more thing, because I've got a lot of friends that are recommending some of these crazy concoctions. They're whipping up foliar sprays with coriander oil, neem oil. Do these work, or is this a lot of kind of grower hocus pocus?
I think they do have some validity to them. Absolutely. Anything that you can coat an insect with, it stops it from breathing. So it does give some pest control in that sense. But keep in mind that a homemade remedy, just like a pesticide, doesn't know a good bug from a bad bug. So if you're deciding to go down the road of beneficial insects and using good bugs, spraying them with a homemade concoction can simply kill them just like it does the pest.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about quickly, this just came to me, is mosquito dunks. Because I have friends that use rain barrels, and they use the mosquito dunks in their rain barrels. And my fear is always that you're going to be doing some harm to the beneficials by using mosquito dunks.
Mosquito dunks actually has a bacterium that's in it that only affects insects that turn into flies. So it's actually a very specific bacteria that is in there. So it really isn't going to harm too many other beneficial insects that are in the water. I can't think of anything that would be in the water that would be beneficial. So it's actually a pretty safe product.
Cool, really cool. We talked a little bit about prevention. One of the big things, I guess, that comes into play there is scouting. And Susan and I spoke a little bit about this. Kind of the overall philosophy is that you're going to be walking the floor, you're going to be looking at your plants, you're going to be scouting for pests, you're going to be scouting for nutrient deficiencies. Whenever you're looking at your plant, you're going to be looking not only for the health of the plant, but also for the presence of any insects. Are there any specific techniques or tools that you would recommend for such an application?
Yeah, really important. Scouting is probably the key to any kind of biological program working well. Keeping really detailed records with your strain, the pests when they showed up, the products that you used on it. But when you're starting to scout your crop, making sure that you have some kind of flagging system so that you know the plants that are infected. You can move those plants potentially to a quarantine area so you're keeping your other plants clean. Pests can move very easily between plants, so being able to segregate those plants that we're deeming as dirty is really important. You're definitely going to need a hand lens. You can use things like sticky cards, really important for monitoring anything that's flying. But the things along those lines are really important to think about when you're doing a scouting program.
Can you tell me about yellow sticky cards? You mentioned some of the other tools. I worked in a greenhouse. It was a floral greenhouse. They didn't use the yellow sticky cards because shit was so out of control, that they were like, you know what, just don't even bother with the yellow sticky cards. You're laughing. You're trying not to laugh right now. Is this something you hear a lot?
Yellow sticky cards, I know they kind of have a bad rap, but they're actually really, really important. In some sense, a yellow sticky card may be your early warning system. It does trap a lot of flying insects. It'll definitely let you know how bad your fungus gnats are. It'll let you know if you have pests like thrips in there. It's a really important tool, even though it is kind of painful to have to look at 100 yellow sticky cards and count everything on there. But over time, it actually will give you a really good idea of what's going on in your greenhouse. We also recommend at times, if yellow sticky cards are not something a grower wants to do, we recommend using trap plants. Trap plants are kind of an unusual way of detecting pests. There are plants that are extremely attractive to things like spidermites and to thrips that will actually siphon that pest out of the crop and onto your trap plant. And that again will show an early warning system that you have something in your crop. One that we usually recommend is the bush bean. The leaf surface on the bush bean is very delicate. So within hours of spider mites feeding on it, you actually can start to see the damage on there. And it's an excellent early warning system in a greenhouse.
So this is something that's going to be, potentially more for the home grower than in a large agricultural setup. You wouldn't likely see a bush bean growing in over down at Afria in Leamington.
I do have some of my large commercial growers that actually have planted the beans outside of the facility, only again to serve as an early warning system. These are places that have a lot of agriculture around them, and they kind of want to know when the pests are moving from agriculture, potentially trying to find a way to get in. So the bush bean would work really well that way as an early warning system, that they can be sort of aware of what's going on outside that potentially may impact their indoor crop.
all comes back to that prevention that we were talking about, and those guys are just kind of one step ahead of the game.
You got it.
So physically, when I'm scouting, what exactly am I looking for? Am I looking, where am I looking on the plant? What am I looking at?
When you're scouting, it's really important to think that you're going to look on a plant, and you want to look anywhere from 10 to 30 leaves on that plant. You want to look at the leaf surface. You want to look underneath the leaf. You're looking for any kind of damage, and that could be streaking on the leaves. That could be pieces of the leaf that's missing. You want to look for webbing. You want to look for any active insects that you might see on the leaf. You want to also look for eggs. Really important that you're sort of looking everywhere and not just looking at one leaf. It's important to take a sample of that entire plant.
Regarding cannabis, we're growing with lights. Is there any considerations regarding flying insects, flying beneficials? I know that a lot of times you get insects that will fly into the light. Is that a consideration at all, or typically not something that is a big issue when you're applying beneficials?
The only one that I could really think of that some growers like to use is ladybugs. Ladybugs are really attracted to the lights that are used in your crop. I find that the rest of my beneficials that fly, the lights have no effect on them at all. It's only ladybugs that I can really think of that you'll find attracted to them.
And are a lot of cannabis growers using ladybugs, or is that typically something that you hear and there's probably something that's more effective for whatever you're trying to control?
There's definitely insects that are more effective. The ladybug is great, but it's too much of a generalist. It never fully cleans up any kind of pest problem, while there are specific predators that really clean up a pest problem a lot better than a ladybug does. It's kind of the poster child. It really, in the long run, probably prevents a lot of growers from spraying anything because they see those ladybugs in their crop. So it allows the other beneficials to actually take foothold, and it prevents them from spraying because they actually just see them.
I like that. It's a poster child. It's pumping the beneficials. This is all really exciting stuff. How can people find out more about natural insect control?
Oh, we have a full website. You can visit our website. It's naturalinsectcontrol.com. To find out all about the products that we offer. There's an email on there that goes directly to me. If you have a bug question, I'm happy to answer it. That's probably the easiest way. You can even give us a call if you want.
And you're on Twitter as well, aren't you?
I am on Twitter. We have a Facebook page. I'm on LinkedIn.
Cool. So we can check you out on LinkedIn as Stacey Hickman.
You got it.
Cool. Stacey, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it, folks. That concludes part 2 of our intro to IPM. Special thanks to Stacey and Susan at Natural Insect Control. Hopefully we'll get a chance to speak with Stacey again over the coming months and bring you some more in-depth coverage on spidermites and thrips, fungus, gnats, a couple more of the pests that you're going to encounter when you're growing pot. If you've been following the show up to this point, just want to take a quick sec to say thank you. It's a work in progress. Every episode's going to get better. So keep checking back for more episodes or follow me online at Terpene.